May 19th, 1944. 13:42 hours. Philippine Sea, 340 miles northeast of Truk Atoll. The Hedgehog fired with the sound like the world tearing open. 24 projectiles erupted from the forward launcher in a rippling blast that shook USS England from keel to mast. The noise in the Combat Information Center was deafening, even through 2 decks of steel. Commander Walton B. Pendleton gripped the edge of the plotting table and watched the sonar trace, his knuckles white, a muscle jumping in his jaw. This was their 4th attack. 3 misses. 1 Japanese submarine still alive 600 yards ahead, hiding in deep water, running silent, trying not to die. Pendleton's mouth was dry. His heart hammered so hard he could feel it in his throat. Somewhere below them, 80 Japanese sailors were listening to those projectiles sink toward their hull, knowing that if even one made contact, they were all dead. Sonarman, 2nd class. Howard Roberts sat hunched over the sonar console, headphones pressed against his ears so hard they left red marks on his skin. He was 22 years old from Oklahoma, and his hands were shaking. He started counting out loud because the silence in CIC was unbearable. 15, 16, 17. The projectiles were sinking at 23 feet per second. At 450 feet depth, they should detonate at 19 seconds if they hit. 18, 19, nothing. Roberts closed his eyes. Miss. Another goddamn miss. Then the ocean exploded. The first detonation hit like a physical blow. England lurched sideways. The lights in CIC flickered. Then another explosion. And another. 6 projectiles detonating in rapid sequence. The sound rolling through the water and up through England's hull. A deep underwater thunder that made the deck plates vibrate under their feet. Roberts tore off his headphones, his face white. Breaking up sounds, Captain. Bulkhead collapse. I hear, oh God, I hear them screaming. His voice cracked. The submarine is breaking apart. Pendleton stood frozen. He had prepared for this moment. He had trained for this. He had run through the scenario in his mind 100 times. But nothing prepared him for the reality. 80 men were dying right now, 600 yards away, trapped inside a steel tube filling with seawater, drowning in darkness. He had given the order. He had killed them. Pendleton wanted to vomit. Instead, he forced his voice to stay steady. Time the breakup. I need to know when she hits bottom. Roberts put the headphones back on with trembling hands and listened. Around the CIC, 8 other men stood silent, staring at instruments, not looking at each other. Chief Gunner's mate Donald Griffiths, who had fired the Hedgehog, sat down heavily in a chair. His face was gray. He was 38 years old enough to be a father to half the men in this room, and he looked like he might cry. This moment, this kill, this awful silence in the CIC, all began 3 weeks earlier on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. May 1st, 1944. Pearl Harbor. Commander Pendleton sat in a sealed briefing room with 11 other destroyer escort captains. The walls were bare concrete. No windows. 2 Marine guards stood outside the door. An intelligence officer from FRUPAC, Fleet Radio Unit Pacific, stood at the front holding a wooden pointer. The officer was thin, pale, like he never saw sunlight. He probably did not. Codebreakers worked in basement rooms with no clocks, breaking Japanese radio traffic 24 hours a day. The officer tapped the map. Gentlemen, Ultra has decrypted Operation AGO. The Japanese are planning a decisive naval engagement. Admiral Toyota believes the Americans will strike either the Marianas or Palau. He does not know which, so he has deployed a submarine picket line. The officer drew a line on the map with his pointer. 7 RO-class submarines, positioned from Truk to the Admiralty Islands, for 20 miles. Each submarine holds a 60-mile station. Their orders are to spot the American fleet, radio the position, and shadow our movements. The officer paused. We have the exact coordinates of every submarine. We know their radio schedules. We know their commanders' names. Admiral Nimitz wants them eliminated before they can report our fleet. Your job, gentlemen, is to find them and kill them. All 7. Pendleton had looked at the map. 7 red circles. 7 targets. 7 submarines captained by men who would do everything possible to avoid dying. The officer had made it sound simple. Hunt them, sink them, mission complete. But Pendleton knew the statistics. Since 1941, the entire U.S. Navy had sunk 47 Japanese submarines across 3 years of war. That was 47 kills by hundreds of ships. 7 submarines in one operation was not a mission. It was a fantasy. But orders were orders. England had one advantage most destroyer escorts did not have. Mounted on the forward deck sat the Hedgehog anti-submarine mortar. 24 spigots arranged in 4 rows of 6. Each spigot held a 65-pound projectile packed with 35 pounds of Torpex explosive. When fired, all 24 projectiles launched simultaneously in an elliptical pattern 140 feet wide. They splashed down 250 yards ahead of the ship and sank. The critical difference between Hedgehog and depth charges was simple. Depth charges exploded at a preset depth whether they hit anything or not. The explosion created a massive pressure wave that destroyed sonar contact for 15 minutes. You were deaf. The submarine could turn any direction and disappear. Hedgehog projectiles only exploded on contact. If they missed, they sank to the bottom inert. Your sonar stayed clear. You could attack again immediately, over and over until you got lucky or the submarine escaped or your crew made a mistake and died. England departed Pearl Harbor on May 10th with 2 other destroyer escorts, George and Raby, Hunter-Killer Group 13.3. They steamed west at 15 knots for 9 days. On May 18th, they reached the search area. Intelligence provided coordinates for I-16, the northernmost submarine in the picket line. Pendleton ordered a box search pattern. England took the center lane. At 13:12 hours on May 19th, Roberts detected the contact. Sonar contact bearing 45, range 3,200 yards. Possible submarine. Pendleton had been eating lunch. He dropped his fork and ran. Now, 30 minutes later, England was closing on I-16 for the 4th time. The first 3 Hedgehog attacks had missed. The submarine kept dodging, diving deeper, using thermoclines to mask its position. But submarines could not run forever. Eventually, batteries died. Eventually, oxygen ran low. Eventually, the captain made a mistake. Pendleton had counted on that. He was right. 600 yards ahead, beneath 450 feet of black water, I-16 sat motionless. Inside the control room, Lieutenant Commander Kanji Matsumura stood gripping the periscope housing, listening to the hydrophone operator's whispered reports. Propeller sounds directly astern. Range decreasing. Destroyer escort closing for another attack. Matsumura was 34 years old. He had been commanding I-16 for 11 months. He had survived 14 war patrols. He understood destroyer tactics. They would fire another pattern. He would wait until the projectiles hit the water, then turn hard and dive below the thermocline. The destroyer's sonar could not track through temperature layers. He would escape. He always escaped. The hydrophone operator suddenly stiffened. Splashes. Multiple splashes. Projectiles entering water, bearing 270 degrees. Matsumura counted seconds. The projectiles would sink past them. Any moment now, they would hear the dull thuds of impact with the ocean floor. Then he would turn and run. 5 seconds. 6. 7. A metallic clang echoed through the hull. One projectile had struck the outer hull plating near the bow. It did not explode. A dud. Matsumura exhaled. Then the second projectile hit. The explosion tore through I-16's forward torpedo room like the fist of God. Steel plates ripped open. Seawater blasted through the breach at 15 tons per second. The 6 men in the torpedo room died instantly, crushed by pressure or shredded by shrapnel. Matsumura was thrown against the periscope. The lights went out. Emergency lanterns flickered on, casting red shadows. The submarine tilted forward at a 30-degree angle. Men slid across the deck, grabbing pipes, screaming. Another explosion hit aft. The engine room flooded. The submarine was dying. Matsumura tried to give orders, but his voice was lost in the shriek of tearing metal. The control room hatch buckled inward. Water sprayed through the seals. Cold, black, unstoppable. Matsumura looked at his crew. Young men, terrified, drowning. He had led them here. His last thought before the water took him was of his wife in Tokyo. He would never see her again. On England, Roberts listened to the submarine's death. The sounds came through his headphones with horrible clarity, the groan of collapsing bulkheads, the hiss of water under pressure. Voices. He could hear voices. Japanese sailors screaming as compartments flooded. Then silence. Roberts pulled off the headphones and stared at the sonar console. His hands would not stop shaking. Pendleton watched him. The kid looked like he might pass out. "Captain," a voice said from the ladder. It was Lieutenant Commander Haynes, the division commander who had come aboard for this operation. "Permission to come to the bridge. We need to verify the kill." Pendleton nodded. He climbed the ladder to the bridge, grateful to escape the CIC, grateful for fresh air. On the bridge, morning sunlight sparkled on calm water. The sea looked peaceful, beautiful even. Pendleton walked to the starboard rail and looked down. England had reduced speed to 5 knots and was drifting past the kill site. The water was no longer peaceful. A massive oil slick spread across the surface, black and thick, gleaming in the sun. Debris bobbed in the slick. Wood planks, clothing, a life jacket. Then Pendleton saw the body. A Japanese sailor, floating face down, arms spread wide. The sailor's uniform was shredded. Pendleton could not tell how old he was. Young. They were all so young. More debris surfaced, papers, a boot, another body. Pendleton turned away. He had killed them all. 80 men. It was necessary. It was war. It changed nothing. They were still dead. Chief Griffiths appeared beside him. "Captain, the crew is asking, did we get it? Did we sink it?" Pendleton looked at the oil slick spreading across a 1/4 mile of ocean. "Yeah, Chief, we got it." Griffiths nodded. "Good. That is good, sir." He did not sound like he thought it was good. He sounded tired. Pendleton walked back to the CIC. Roberts was still sitting at the sonar console, staring at nothing. Pendleton put a hand on his shoulder. "You did well, Roberts." Roberts looked up at him with hollow eyes. "I heard them die, sir. I heard every second of it." Pendleton did not know what to say, so he said nothing. He walked to the plotting table and looked at the chart. 7 red circles. One now had a black X drawn through it. I-16 destroyed. 6 submarines remained. 6 more hunts. 6 more attacks. 6 more kills. Pendleton suddenly understood what the next 2 weeks were going to be like, and he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. May 22nd, 1944. 03:14 hours, 180 miles east of Truk. Howard Roberts had not slept in 47 hours. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard them. The Japanese sailors inside I-16, screaming. The sound of water rushing into compartments. Metal tearing. Voices crying out in a language he did not understand, but whose terror needed no translation. Roberts lay in his bunk in the darkness, staring at the bottom of the rack above him, his hands clenched into fists. His body ached with exhaustion. His mind would not stop replaying the sounds. At 0320 hours, he gave up. He climbed out of his bunk, pulled on his uniform with shaking hands, and walked back to the sonar compartment. If he was going to be awake anyway, he might as well work. At least, when he was listening to the ocean, he was not listening to the ghosts in his head. The sonar room was dark except for the green glow of the display screen. Roberts sat down at his station and put on the headphones. The weight was almost comforting, familiar. He closed his eyes and listened to the ocean. Just water sounds, the hiss of currents, the clicks and pops of marine life. No submarines, not yet. But they were out there. 6 more Japanese submarines hiding in 4,000 fathoms of black water, and Roberts would find them, because that was his job. Find them so Pendleton could kill them, so the Hedgehog could tear their hulls open and let the ocean rush in, so more men could drown screaming in the dark. Roberts opened his eyes and adjusted the sonar controls. His hands were steady. That surprised him. He felt like he was falling apart inside, but his hands were steady. At 0640 hours, he detected the second submarine. Contact bearing 0092, range 4,200 yards, possible submarine. His voice on the sound-powered phone was calm, professional. This was RO-106. Intelligence had provided approximate coordinates. Roberts had found it almost exactly where predicted. Within 5 minutes, the alarm klaxon sounded throughout the ship. Commander Pendleton appeared in the sonar compartment, his uniform wrinkled, his face unshaven, dark circles under his eyes. He looked like Roberts felt. Classification? Submarine, sir. Confidence high. Depth 240 feet. Speed 5 knots. Pendleton nodded. Good work. Let us go kill another one. The attack took 40 minutes. RO-106 tried to run, diving to 310 feet, turning northwest toward deeper water. Roberts tracked it through 2 course changes. At 100 yards, Pendleton ordered the Hedgehog attack. The launcher fired. 24 projectiles arced into the dawn sky. Roberts counted seconds. 15, 16, 17, 2 explosions, direct hits. The submarine broke apart. Roberts heard the bulkheads collapse through his headphones, heard the water, heard voices. He closed his eyes and kept listening until the sounds stopped. When he opened them, Pendleton was standing beside him. "You okay?" Roberts nodded. "Yes, sir. It was a lie." Pendleton knew it was a lie, but there was no time for truth. 5 submarines remained. The hunt continued. May 23rd and 24th passed in a blur of contacts, attacks, explosions. RO-104 took 7 attacks from George and Raby before England moved in and killed it with 2 Hedgehog patterns. 76 men dead. RO-116 tried to fight back, pinging England with active sonar, trying to create false echoes. Roberts filtered out the deception and tracked the real target. 1 attack, 1 kill. 68 men dead. RO-108 died on May 26th after a single Hedgehog attack. 71 men dead, 4 submarines in 5 days. The crew of England stopped counting individual kills. The submarines blurred together into a single continuous hunt. Find, track, attack, kill, repeat. The oil slicks spreading across the water all looked the same. The debris all looked the same. The bodies floating in the wreckage all looked the same. Young men in torn uniforms, face down in the water, dead because England had found them. Chief Gunner's mate Donald Griffiths stopped eating. He sat in the forward crew compartment, staring at his hands. Hands that loaded the Hedgehog projectiles. Hands that maintained the firing mechanism. Hands that had helped kill 291 men in 5 days. Seaman First Class Tommy Chen found him there at 1830 hours on May 26th. "Chief, you need to eat something." Griffiths looked up slowly. "How do you do it, Chen? How do you just keep going like nothing is happening?" Chen sat down across from him. "I do not think about it, Chief. I do my job. I load projectiles. What happens after I load them is not my responsibility. That is the captain's responsibility." Griffiths shook his head. "We are killing hundreds of people. Hundreds. And we are doing it like it is factory work. Load, fire, kill, load, fire, kill." Chen was quiet for a moment. "They are the enemy, Chief. They would kill us if they could." Griffiths knew that was true. It did not make anything easier. May 31st, 1944. 06:02 hours. RO-105 was the last submarine, and it knew something was catastrophically wrong. For 3 days, Lieutenant Commander Hiroshi Tabata had listened to static on the radio frequencies where 6 other submarines should have been broadcasting position reports. Nothing. Just silence. Tabata understood what that silence meant. His entire picket line was gone, destroyed. And now the Americans were coming for him. He stood in the control room of RO-105, looking at his crew. 42 young men, exhausted, frightened, running on fumes. They had been submerged for 68 hours. The air was stale, thick with carbon dioxide. Batteries were at 23%. Oxygen was critical, but surfacing meant death. The Americans were out there, hunting. Tabata had to make a choice: die slowly from suffocation, or surface and die quickly from American guns. He chose to live as long as possible. RO-105 stayed deep and ran silent. When England detected the submarine at 06:02 hours, Tabata knew this was the beginning of the end. He heard the destroyer's propellers through the hull, the distinctive high-speed vibration of an American warship closing for attack. Tabata ordered crash dive. RO-15 plunged to 480 feet, the maximum safe depth, and leveled out in cold black water. The pressure hull groaned, pipes creaked, men held their breath. Through the hydrophone, they heard splashes, projectiles entering the water. Tabata counted. 24 splashes. The new American weapon. The thing that had killed 6 submarines without warning. The projectiles sank toward them. Tabata ordered hard right rudder. RO-105 turned. The projectiles passed by and hit the ocean floor with dull thuds. No explosions. Tabata exhaled. They had survived. But the Americans would attack again and again until his luck ran out. For 25 hours the Americans attacked. England, George, Raby, Hazelwood, Spangler. 5 destroyer escorts hunting 1 submarine. Tabata used every evasion tactic. Sharp turns under thermoclines. Deep dives to 500 feet, beyond safe limits. Long periods of silence, drifting with ocean currents. Machinery shut down. Crew barely breathing. 16 hedgehog attacks. 16 times projectiles splashed into the water above them. 16 times Tabata maneuvered away, but each maneuver drained batteries. Each deep dive consumed oxygen. By 2300 hours on May 31st, RO-105 was dying. Battery power was at 4%. Oxygen was below minimum safe levels. 3 crew members had already passed out from carbon dioxide poisoning. Tabata had no choice. He ordered surface. At 0:01 hours on June 1st, RO-105 broke surface 4,000 yards from England's position. On England's bridge, the lookout screamed. Submarine bearing 270. On the surface. Range 4,000 yards. Pendleton grabbed his binoculars and looked. He could see it. A black silhouette against the stars. The submarine's conning tower. The deck gun. He could even see men on the bridge. Japanese sailors staring back at him across 4,000 yards of black water. Pendleton picked up the radio. All ships, target bearing 270, range 4,000 yards. Prepare to engage. But Division Commander Haynes's voice cut in immediately. Negative. Cease fire. All ships hold fire. Repeat, hold fire. You are too close together. Risk of friendly fire is too high. Pendleton stared at the submarine in frustration. They had it. Right there, sitting on the surface. And they could not shoot because George and Hazelwood were 2,000 yards beyond the submarine. One wild shell and they would hit their own ships. On RO 105, Tabitha screamed orders. Start the diesels. Maximum charging rate. We have 30 minutes. His chief engineer ran to the engine room. The diesels coughed, sputtered, and roared to life. Sweet exhaust filled the air. The battery charging system hummed. Oxygen flooded the submarine through the air intakes. Men gasped, sucking in fresh air, feeling their heads clear. Tabitha stood on the bridge and watched the American ships. 5 destroyers circling like sharks. Why were they not shooting? Then he understood. They were afraid of hitting each other. This was his only chance. He needed 40 minutes to charge batteries enough for one more dive, one more run, maybe enough to escape. 38 minutes later, at 0:39 hours, Tabitha ordered crash dive. RO 105 slipped beneath the surface and plunged to 450 feet. The batteries had 18% charge, enough for maybe 6 hours of slow speed maneuvering. After that, nothing. Tabitha positioned the submarine above a thermal layer at 460 feet and went completely silent. All machinery off except life support. Crew at action stations, not moving, barely breathing. Maybe the Americans would lose contact. Maybe they would think RO 105 had escaped. Maybe they would give up. Tabitha did not believe any of this, but he had to try. On England, Roberts had been on sonar for 22 hours straight. His eyes burned. His vision blurred when he looked away from the green screen. The headphones had cut grooves into his skull. His hands cramped on the controls. Someone had brought him coffee 4 hours ago. It sat cold and untouched beside the console. Roberts stared at the sonar display. The submarine was there, sitting motionless at 450 feet. The captain thought he was hidden, but Roberts could still hear him. Faint machinery noise, a rhythmic hum that might have been pumps or ventilation. The submarine was tired, damaged, running on nothing. This was the end. Roberts keyed the sound-powered phone. "Captain, I have the contact. Bearing 124, range 3,200 yards, depth 450 feet. The submarine is stationary. Probably thinks the thermocline is masking it, but I can hear machinery noise." "He is there, sir." Pendleton stood in CIC and looked around at his crew. They were all exhausted. Griffiths sat slumped in a chair, his eyes closed. Lieutenant Williamson, the gunnery officer, leaned against the bulkhead, struggling to stay upright. Pendleton himself had been awake for 38 hours. His head ached, his hands trembled slightly. He wanted to sleep for a week, but there was one more submarine, one more kill. Then they could rest. England, move into attack position. Pendleton's voice was hoarse. "All other ships maintain position. This is our kill. We finished what we started." England increased speed to 12 knots and closed on the submarine. At 1,000 yards, Roberts spoke quietly. "Captain, the submarine just shut down all machinery. He knows we are coming. He is waiting to die." Pendleton felt something twist in his chest. The Japanese captain knew. He understood this was the end. And he was sitting there in the darkness with his crew, waiting for England to kill them all. Pendleton picked up the microphone. "Fire at 600 yards, tight pattern, depth 450 feet. Chief, make this one count." Griffiths opened his eyes and walked slowly to the Hedgehog firing station. He looked at Pendleton. His face was gray, exhausted, haunted. "Ready, sir." At 600 yards, Pendleton gave the order. "Fire." The Hedgehog launcher erupted one last time. 24 projectiles arced through the morning sky and splashed into calm water. Roberts counted. His voice was barely a whisper. 15, 16, 17. 3 massive explosions shook England. The submarine's pressure hull ruptured. Water flooded the control room, the engine room, the forward torpedo compartment. RO-105 imploded at 600 feet, crushed by water pressure. 81 men died in less than 3 seconds. The ocean fell silent. Roberts pulled off his headphones and set them on the console. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold them. Pendleton walked over and put a hand on his shoulder. "It is over. We are done. All 7 submarines destroyed." Roberts looked up at him. His eyes were red, hollow. "How many, sir? How many men did we kill total?" Pendleton did the math. 480, give or take. Roberts nodded slowly. 480 men. "I heard every single one of them die, sir. Every scream, every bulkhead collapse, every second. I heard all of it." His voice broke. "How am I supposed to live with that?" Pendleton had no answer. He wanted to say it was necessary. He wanted to say it was war. He wanted to say those men would have killed Americans if given the chance. All of that was true. None of it mattered. Roberts would carry those sounds for the rest of his life. They all would. Pendleton looked around CIC. Griffiths sitting with his head in his hands. Williamson staring at nothing. The plotting crew standing silent. They had accomplished something extraordinary. 6 submarines sunk in 12 days. A record that would never be broken. And it felt like the worst thing they had ever done. Pendleton picked up the microphone for the general announcing system. "All hands, this is the captain. The mission is complete. All 7 submarines destroyed, well done. Secure from battle stations. Set condition 3. We are going home." He hung up the microphone. Home. England would return to Pearl Harbor. The crew would get shore leave. They would drink and try to forget. Some would succeed, most would not. Pendleton walked to the bridge and stood at the rail, looking at the empty ocean. The last oil slick was already dissipating. In a few hours there would be no trace that RO-105 had ever existed. No evidence that 81 men had died here. Just calm water and morning sun, beautiful and peaceful and utterly indifferent to death. Pendleton stood there for a long time, trying to feel something, anything. But there was just emptiness and exhaustion, and the knowledge that tomorrow, if ordered, he would do it all again. June 15th, 1944. Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. USS England steamed into Pearl Harbor at 8:30 hours. Her hull scarred with rust and salt, her crew lined on deck in dress whites that no longer fit properly. Most men had lost 10 to 15 pounds during the patrol. Howard Roberts stood at attention on the fantail, squinting in the bright Hawaiian sun, trying not to think about the sounds in his head, the screaming, the water rushing into flooded compartments, the voices crying out in Japanese as submarines broke apart. He kept his face blank. Around him, other sailors were smiling, waving at the crowd gathering on the pier. Roberts could not smile. His hands gripped the rail so hard his knuckles went white. As England tied up at the dock, a Navy band played. Admiral Francis Lowe stood waiting with a cluster of officers. Commander Pendleton walked down the gangway and saluted. The Admiral returned the salute, then did something unusual. He turned and saluted the entire crew standing on deck. "Gentlemen," his voice carried across the water, "you have accomplished something extraordinary. Admiral Ernest King, Chief of Naval Operations, has sent a personal message." He pulled a paper from his pocket and read, quote, "There will always be an England in the United States Navy," unquote. The crew cheered. Roberts did not cheer. He thought about 480 dead men, and wondered if Admiral King had any idea what it cost to earn that message. The debriefing took 3 days. Intelligence officers questioned every member of the sonar and fire control teams. They wanted details, exact ranges, attack patterns, kill rates. Pendleton answered mechanically. 6 submarines, 16 Hedgehog attacks total. Average 2.6 attacks per kill. 37% hit rate. The officers wrote everything down, already planning to turn England's tactics into training doctrine for other destroyer escorts. Make one ship's success repeatable. Pendleton signed the reports and left. He did not tell them about Robert sitting in the sonar compartment listening to men drown for 20 hours straight. He did not tell them about Chief Griffiths refusing to eat because his hands had loaded the projectiles that killed 291 men. Those details were not useful for training manuals. On June 27, 1944, USS England received the Presidential Unit Citation. The entire crew assembled on the fantail, while Admiral Lowe pinned the citation streamer to the ship's battle flag. Pendleton accepted a Navy Cross. He looked at the medal in his hand, a piece of bronze shaped like a cross with an eagle in the center. It felt heavier than it should. He put it in his pocket and never wore it. Chief Griffiths received a bronze star. He stared at it for a long time, then put it in his locker and closed the door. Roberts received a commendation. He threw it in a drawer and tried to forget about it. 7,000 miles away, in Kure Naval Base, Japan, things were very different. July 3, 1944. Vice Admiral Takeo Takagi stood before a room of submarine commanders, explaining the catastrophe. Our NA Line picket deployment failed completely. 7 submarines deployed, 7 submarines lost in 12 days. 0 American fleet movements reported. The entire operation was annihilated by 1 American destroyer escort. He paused. 1 ship, designated DE-635. Name unknown but confirmed by survivors from merchantmen we attacked. They called it a Buckley-class destroyer escort, armed with a new anti-submarine mortar that fires 24 projectiles simultaneously. Contact detonation only, no sonar disruption. The weapon allows continuous attacks until target destruction. The room was silent. Lieutenant Commander Shoichi Tagami, captain of I-36, raised his hand. "Sir, how do we counter this weapon?" Takagi shook his head. "We do not. If you encounter this ship, you run. Full evasion. Silent running. Maximum depth. Do not attempt to fight." 6 submarines tried. All 6 are gone. 480 men killed. The average time from first contact to destruction was 90 minutes. He looked around the room. This American ship is the most effective submarine hunter ever deployed. Until we develop countermeasures, we avoid it at all costs. Several commanders exchanged glances. Avoid 1 American destroyer escort. The suggestion seemed impossible, but the casualty numbers were undeniable. On July 20, 1944, Lieutenant Commander Tagami encountered a Buckley-class destroyer escort 200 miles east of Saipan. His sonar operator detected the ship at 4,800 yards. Tagami looked through the periscope. He could see the hull number, DE-635. Tagami felt his blood turn cold. It was the ship, the submarine killer, the one they had been warned about. He ordered immediate crash dive. "Take us to 500 feet, silent running. Shut down all non-essential systems." His crew stared at him. "Sir, we have not been detected. We have the advantage. We could torpedo her." Tagami turned to face them. "That ship has killed 6 submarines. I am not making it 7. We dive, now." I-36 went deep and silent. England passed overhead, her sonar pinging, searching. But Tagami had acted quickly enough. England's sonar did not detect the deep contact. After 40 minutes, England moved on. I-36 waited another 3 hours before surfacing. Tagami wrote in his log, encountered DE-635 at 1420 hours, evaded through extreme measures. This ship is death. Do not engage under any circumstances. His report circulated through Japanese submarine command. Other captains read it and understood. There was a ship in the Pacific that killed submarines faster than they could be replaced, and its name was England. USS England returned to war on July 3, 1944. Convoy escort duty, submarine hunting patrols. But the hunting had changed. Japanese submarines withdrew from forward positions. They avoided areas where England operated. The crew noticed. Roberts spent his watches listening to empty ocean. Pendleton wrote reports and tried not to think about the explosions. Griffiths maintained the Hedgehog launcher even though they rarely fired it. The war continued. England kept working. Months passed. May 9, 1945. 1420 hours. Radar picket duty off Okinawa. Roberts was sleeping in his bunk when general quarters sounded. He grabbed his helmet and ran to the sonar compartment. Through the passageways he heard shouting, "Aircraft inbound. This is not a drill." Roberts reached his station and put on headphones. But sonar was useless against aircraft. He could only sit and wait. On the bridge, Pendleton stared through binoculars at 3 dots approaching from the northwest at 200 feet altitude. Kamikaze. The radio crackled. Air raid red. 3 bandits bearing 315, range 8 miles. Pendleton picked up the microphone. All gun crews stand by. The 5-inch gun swung northwest. The 40-millimeter crews gripped their weapons. At 4 miles, Pendleton could see them clearly. 3 Mitsubishi A6M0s in loose formation, coming straight at England. Commence firing. The 5-inch gun roared. The first shell exploded 2,000 yards ahead of the lead Zero. Too far. The crew adjusted. The 40-millimeter guns opened up, tracers arcing through the sky. The lead Zero jinked left, then right, still closing. At 1,500 yards, the 20-millimeter guns joined in. The noise was overwhelming. Pendleton watched the lead Zero take hits in the left wing. Pieces flew off. The aircraft wavered but kept coming. At 800 yards, Pendleton could see the pilot hunched over the controls. Young. Maybe 20. Determined. The Zero was 400 yards out when gunner's mate second class Michael Torres, manning a 40-millimeter gun, put a 3-round burst into the engine. The Zero exploded in midair, cartwheeling into the ocean 100 yards from England. The second Zero pulled up and circled. The third came straight in. Pendleton watched it approach. Time slowed. He could see the bomb strapped under the fuselage. 250 kilograms. Enough to split England in half. The 40-millimeter guns tracked it, firing continuously. Hits sparkled across the fuselage. The Zero kept coming. At 300 yards, the pilot banked right, lining up on the bridge. Pendleton knew he was about to die. The thought was strangely calm. After 6 submarines, after 480 kills, after everything they had survived, he was going to die here. Killed by a pilot he could see clearly enough to describe. The Zero was 100 yards out when Torres hit it again. Rounds tore through the cockpit. The pilot slumped forward, but the aircraft's momentum carried it forward, spinning. It missed the bridge by 15 feet and slammed into the superstructure amidships. The bomb exploded on impact. The blast threw Pendleton against the bulkhead. His vision went gray. His ears stopped working. Then sound rushed back. Screaming, alarms, fire. Pendleton pulled himself upright. A 20-foot hole gaped in the superstructure. Fire poured from the wound. Black smoke boiled into the sky. Men were screaming. Pendleton ran down the ladder to the main deck. The passageway through the superstructure was gone. The Zero had penetrated 2 decks before the bomb exploded. The mess deck, sick bay, crew berthing, all destroyed. Bodies lay scattered in the wreckage. Pendleton saw gunner's mate First Class David Walsh lying against a bulkhead. His legs were gone below the knees. Dead. Seaman Harold Kim sat propped against a locker, holding his intestines in with both hands. Still alive. Looking at Pendleton with wide, terrified eyes. Kim's lips moved. "Help me." Pendleton knelt beside him. "Stay with me. You are going to be fine." Kim shook his head slowly. "No, sir. Tell my mom. Tell her." He stopped talking. His hands fell away from his stomach. His eyes went empty. Kim died holding Pendleton's hand. He was 19 years old, from San Francisco. He had been aboard England for 7 months. Torres appeared in the wreckage, his face covered in soot. "Captain, we have 18 critically wounded. The sick bay is destroyed. We are treating them on the fantail." Pendleton nodded. "How many dead?" Torres looked at the bodies scattered around them. "At least 30, sir, maybe more. We are still pulling people out." Pendleton felt something break inside his chest. 30 dead. After everything. After surviving 6 submarines. After becoming legends. 30 of his men were dead because one pilot decided to die today. The fire raged for 3 hours. Damage control teams fought it with foam, water, chemical extinguishers. At 17:30 hours, they got it under control. The final count came in. 37 dead, 25 wounded. Torres found Pendleton on the bridge. "Sir, I hit both zeros. Good hits, clean hits. And they still came. They still killed 37 men. What am I supposed to do with that?" Pendleton had no answer. "You did your job, Torres. Sometimes that is not enough." Torres nodded slowly. "Yeah, sometimes it is not enough." He walked away. Pendleton stood at the rail and looked at the gutted superstructure. They had killed 480 Japanese submariners. Now, 37 of his crew were dead. War balanced scales whether you wanted it to or not. USS England limped back to Lithi for repairs. The damage was severe. The superstructure needed complete rebuilding. Hull repairs required months of welding. August 15, 1945. Japan surrendered. The war ended while England sat in the repair yard. The crew heard the news over loudspeakers and cheered. Roberts stood on the fantail and felt nothing. They had won. It did not change anything. The sounds in his head were still there. October 12, 1946. Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. Pendleton received orders to report to the shipyard commander's office. He walked through the base wondering why. When he arrived, a captain he did not recognize handed him a folder. "Commander, I regret to inform you that USS England has been selected for decommissioning. Effective November 15th. The Navy is reducing the fleet. We have too many ships for peacetime operations. Destroyer escorts are particularly surplus. England will be decommissioned and held in reserve." Pendleton stared at the captain. England. The ship that killed 6 submarines. The ship Admiral King said would always be remembered. Decommissioned after 18 months. The captain seemed to read his thoughts. "I know, Commander. It seems wrong. But there are 300 destroyer escorts being decommissioned this year. England is just one of them. The decision is final." Pendleton walked back to the pier where England sat, half gutted, her superstructure torn apart for repairs that would never be finished. He thought about Admiral King's message. There will always be an England in the United States Navy. It had been a lie. Or maybe King had meant it at the time, but circumstances changed. Wars ended. Ships became obsolete. Promises were forgotten. Pendleton stood looking at England for a long time. Then he walked away. On November 15, 1946, USS England was officially decommissioned. The crew was dispersed. The ship was towed to a reserve anchorage and left to rust. In 1947, the Navy sold England for scrap. The ship was towed to a breaker's yard and cut apart. The steel that had survived 6 submarine hunts and a kamikaze attack was melted down and recycled into beams, into car parts, into refrigerators. The most successful submarine hunter in naval history disappeared. No memorial, no museum, just scrap metal sold by the pound. December 2024. Oklahoma City. Howard Roberts was 102 years old. He lived in a nursing home on the east side of the city. A Navy historian came to interview him about USS England. The historian was young, maybe 30, with a digital recorder and a notebook. He asked Roberts about the submarine hunts, about the 6 kills in 12 days, about the record. Roberts answered the questions. Yes, 6 submarines. Yes, hedgehog attacks. Yes, I was the sonar operator. The historian leaned forward. What was it like? Being part of history? Making that kind of record? Roberts was quiet for a long time. He looked out the window at the parking lot. Gray concrete. Empty except for a few cars. Finally, he spoke. I heard 480 men die, every scream, every explosion, every bulkhead collapse. The sounds never stopped. Not in 80 years. The historian wrote that down. Is there anything else you want people to know about USS England? Roberts turned back to face him. His eyes were clear, sharp. Yeah, tell them this. We did something nobody else could do. We killed 6 submarines in 12 days, and it nearly destroyed us. Every man on that ship carried those kills for the rest of his life. Some of them ate their guns. Some drank themselves to death. Some just stopped sleeping. We were heroes, we got medals, and we were broken. All of us. That is what I want people to know. The historian closed his notebook. He thanked Roberts and left. Roberts sat in his chair and looked out the window. The sounds were still there. They always would be. Today, the United States Navy has no ship named England. The name was used once more on a guided missile cruiser from 1963 to 1994. But that was a different ship, a different war. The original England, DE-635, exists only in records and fading memories. Her record stands. 6 submarines in 12 days. 480 enemy sailors killed, a feat never equaled. But Admiral King was wrong. There is no England in the Navy anymore. The ship is gone. The name is forgotten. Only the ghosts remain.